Hey folks, Salty Seaman here for another Tales from the Fleet. Going to do another little jump ahead here to my second time in Vladivostok, Russia. Interesting here because I was just watching a deep dive on the Bert Kreischer machine story. If you don't know the story, the basic. I know a lot of you have seen it. Just look up Bert Kreischer, the machine. That is his comedic take on it. Of his trip to Russia around the same time frame as when I went to my first trip in Russia, but on the on the western part near Moscow. He's on a college class trip, in his dealings with the mafia. It's a hilarious story. I love it. But he also did a deeper dive on that entire trip for like an hour on his podcast, and I was just recently enjoying that. And of course, brings back my own Russian memories and new information I've gotten or been reminded of. So I thought, well, I already did the original Russia story, so let's go ahead and jump forward to the second time I was in Russia. Couple of years later, so the same ship, still Blue Ridge. I'm an E4 at this point, a YN3. There's some changes to how they're letting us go in town this time because we've done it. Now, I don't know how many ships at this point have been here because the Fife was there before us. They were the first, post the wall coming down. Then the Blue Ridge was there, and there's probably another ship there the next year. So this might have been like the fourth American port visit into Vladivostok, third ship, if I recall correctly. This has been over 20 years here at this point. But if I mentioned the first time we went there in 96, I was a brand new kid. I may have just got promoted to E2, basically. Couple months on board. We had a Liberty policy 4 to a group. You came back with the same people you signed out with. Everyone's back by midnight, E1 through 09. And and you came back with the people you left with, and that was it. We weren't overly mad about it, I think, because it was Russia and it was just such a thing. But it was definitely, it felt nicer the next time we changed it to, it was 2 to a group, still in whites, but I believe you could switch up in town as long as you came back with 2 people. All was good, and it was now divided by an extra hour for E4 and above. Could stay out to 1 a.m. E3 and below still to come back by midnight. Now, in the original story, I left out a little bit because I completely forgot this aspect of it. Our Captain Lebrec, the captain of our ship at the time, reminded us on our Facebook page, some of my shipmates from that era have, that there was we talked about all the very pretty and very, very friendly ladies of Russia. Well, not all of it was altruistic. They weren't all there just to meet some American sailors and practice their English and possibly hook up. There's a shit ton of Russian agents there. And we knew about it, and they knew we knew about it. It was basically our intel services easily picked up the fact that they activated a bunch of Russian women agents, and they all sent them to Vladivostok. And this is for the this is talk about the 1996 trip now. So, but of course, it wasn't just us. I mean, there was I said it was the 250th anniversary, so we had a lot of different navies there. But of course, I mean, they were not making it any kind of secret. They're like, yeah, you're coming here, and we're doing that. What are you going to do about it? Best thing you can do is just tell your sailors, hey, watch out for people trying to get information from you. And I don't remember them hammering it home that hard, honestly, but I think it was letting it be known. An interesting thought about this, especially looking at this post 9/11 now. Well, number one, we're all out in whites. We're all out in uniform in a foreign country, which just doesn't happen anymore. This is definitely a tale of a bygone era. But definitely the people with ratings that would know some shit that the Russians would probably like, were wearing rating patches out in town, ISs, all the various kinds of CTs. So I mean, it was, I'm sure those guys got a different kind of brief than we got just based on their job. Probably briefs they've gotten since A school, just on like, hey, motherfucker, we're in Russia. The agents are going to know exactly who you are because of your rating patch. You're going out there. So, just extra reminder, keep your mouth shut as you always do, but be on the lookout for people who are, we know for a fact, and this probably would go for both 96 and 98, they are looking for you, and they're going to be asking you stuff, so be wary. So I always kind of wonder about that in retrospect. And of course, the rest of us being out there, like that went out of our minds pretty much as soon as we were out there. The fact that some of these women could be Russian agents. We're young kids. We're looking at pretty girls who want to talk to us. So, regardless, I don't know how much information they got at her. I don't know if I mentioned on the last video in Russia and how they just stole all our shit when we did ship tours. It was just they did some stuff which I'm very curious about in terms of psyops. I know there's at one point they led a group of Russian admirals into the intel space, into the actual fucking safe that's behind the lock. That was usually the locked door with all the screens up and running. It's part of the tour. And like it was done very, very intentionally. That part I did hear about. But stuff like, they went up through the, where the QMs kept the charts and graphs and stuff, and all that shit was gone. Like after the tours were over, they'd stolen erasers, pens, pencils, every scrap of paper, every bit of, the little doodads they used to mark charts and maps and shit. So, I mean, a lot of fun. I mean, I'm sure some of them were just souvenirs from the regulars, but I guarantee a lot of that was people looking to sell some shit. Or were already agents to begin with. So to the 98 trip, I actually have, I don't remember it to the detail as well as I did for the 96 one, but certain elements I do definitely stick out for me. Like I can't really remember who I went out with day by day. I know I went out, speaking of an intel friend, my friend Tony Wild, I know I went out with him one day. Like I have a picture of us together. And I have memories of being out with him, running into my friend Roth, which I will get to because there's a lot of story there. But I don't think we ever went out together, or if we did, we separated at one point because even though he had picked up E4 in the last test, he missed the frocking because I believe he was home on leave, and they hadn't got around to frocking him before Russia, and he ended up getting frocked after. He didn't really care. I don't think the command was doing it because they were worried about him because he was generally a model kind of sailor in terms of liberty. I mean, his issues are all internal with his mouth and just him being him. But yeah, he wasn't a guy who drank almost ever, and wasn't a guy you worried about coming back late all the time. He didn't do that. So, but I think it was just a matter of they just didn't have fucking time to do it. So, but yeah, speak a guy who didn't drink. We'll get to that here in Russia. But yeah, like last time, and this is, it's a place where you, you drink a bit. You don't eat a lot because there's just not a lot of, there are no, back then, both times I went in the 90s, there were no American options for, like not even a McDonald's at that point. So you were left up to how adventurous you were trying Russian cuisine, and it wasn't always pretty. And I consider myself pretty open-minded with new food. And yeah, I learned after, a combined week there between 2 years, like to be very picky about what I was going to get from there because it wasn't always going to be good. The biggest looked like some kind of chain of a burger place that was local to Russia. There was a line out the door, and we finally got our burgers, and it tasted like shit. And like we all came to the same conclusion that whatever meat we had, it was not beef. And what it was, who knows? But it was a mediocre burger at best. And kind of trying if you're thinking about what is actually in the meat. But it was the second trip was we ran into the girls a lot more this time. I think it was a little easier because we were broken up in groups of two. I mean, people obviously went out more. People would form clumps, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. But you definitely saw more of an uptick of the girls who wanted to talk to you because you weren't in generally in this bunch of 4, which makes everything lopsided. So yeah, that upticked, and I'm sure a lot of them were agents. I mean, who knows? I mean, that's probably how quickly they would lose interest in my group, and like we're all a bunch of like, oh yeah, it's like, so what do you do on the ship? It's like, oh, we do paperwork. And like, oh, we take photos. Like, oh, I write stories. So hanging out with all the admin types or whatever. I print. I'm sure, like, yeah, a lot of times I was hanging out with any of my admin types. That's probably like they lost interest in us pretty quick. Like, hey, let's go to the bar. Let's talk to you. They're like, I wonder if I wish I remember hanging out with Anthony more just because he had that friggin' intel patch on, and I can't remember how he addressed what he did on the ship. I'm sure he didn't say exactly what he was because he knew better, but I just don't. It just wasn't something and I thought of too much back in those days. I knew Tony did some secret squirrel shit, whatever. He's got to be a little more careful about talking about what he does. That's cool. And that's about the beginning and end that I thought of it back then. But yeah, but the girls were fine and plenty, and then they are. They're if you like that, especially if you like that Eastern European look. I mean, they're just a lot of really, really gorgeous women wearing a lot of skimpy and often see-through clothing. And what I read about later, which was interesting, Russia was going through a sexual revolution about this point, about the mid to late 90s, post the fall of communism. Communism, a lot of people don't talk about, I think, was especially the Russian kind was very moralistic, along with politically, financially. The communism ideals were pretty prudish, and being a openly sexual being, I guess, was kind of frowned on, which is a lot of people I think associate with religious morals. And this is an interesting case of this is an atheistic culture, but they're still enforcing these kind of sexual moral rules. And with the fall of communism, there was kind of an opening of with the young people. So you combine that with the probably dozens upon dozens of agents out here trolling for secrets or whatnot, and mixed with a bunch of just young, sexually active during a revolution women, when they're like, oh, here's something neat and exotic, foreign American sailors. It was kind of it was a lot more bumping in '98 than it was in '96. I can tell you that. Anyone who did both trips and who indulged in such things could probably also tell you the difference between the two trips. Now, a couple interesting things about the trip. They were playing music about every night, and it was next to the beach. There was this big kind of open festival square area, which I remember from the first year. The second year, definitely, it was every night there was bands playing, local music. Our 7th Fleet Band played it a bunch of times. There was a lot going on, and that's where a lot of times you end up. And I remember one time it's really far north here. We're not talking Alaska far, which I've been to Anchorage. And it's a different experience in July than Vladivostok, but Vladivostok is kind of close to that. In which during the daytime it's summer and it's July summer. It's pretty hot. We're out in summer whites, as I said before. You will sweat, but once it gets past evening, it gets past dinner time. The sun's still up. The sun stays up till 11 because we're so far north, but it gets pretty chilly past 6 o'clock. So keep all that in mind. So it's 8:30. So I've probably been out. I think it's the second day. And I've been out since I had the first 3 days off, I recall, and I had duty the last day. And I remember, I had a bit of vodka and some beers for sure in the last 12 hours. God knows what I had ate. I know I had put food in my system at various times. Probably not the best, I would guess. But I'm lost. Whoever I was out with, I was not with them at the time. It might have been the day I was with Tony. And he was lost, and he's kind of a short. I mean, he's Asian, so he's kind of easy to spot in Russia, but he is really short, and I'm in a big crowd, so the guys kind of lost him among a sea of other just scattered white uniforms out there, and it was whatever. We had plenty of time. I wasn't that worried about it. I ran into my friend Roth, who I talked about earlier. Roth was with a character, a definite character, TJ, the Russian pimp. Now, again, I said it's pretty chilly at this point, but TJ he's been kind of hanging out with Roth and whoever he was with, pretty much all day. TJ was wearing a wool suit, which during 2 o'clock in the afternoon would have been extremely fucking hot, considering I was wearing summer whites and I was kind of cooking at that point. So I imagine what this crazy motherfucker was doing. But apparently, according to them, they never saw him sweat 1 ounce. He chain smoked Marlboro Reds. And he spoke really, really good English. And they asked him where he learned English. He said Harvard. There was no reason to doubt him. He had a lot of stories about Massachusetts and his time in America. This is the guy who went and did his education at Harvard and came back to Vladivostok. Again, looking back on the agent side, if he was an agent, he gave a really kind of broad kind of a very suspicious story, I would think, but I don't think he was. I think he was just what he said he was. You know, he seemed genuine. Like, he did not seem like a guy who had like an ounce of bullshit in his system. Which is one of the reasons I think we end up liking him. But I run into them. You know, good times going on. I think I talked to a couple other people. Again, I said spotting people in whites is pretty easy in the crowd. Music's playing. And of course, you're looking around at the different girls. I ended up this conversation with this girl. She's wearing, again, it's chilly. She's wearing like a sweater top, but she's not like, doesn't have it on. Like but she like just has it over her shoulder, which I don't think anything of. And I'm not being very attentive to everything on her. Possibly here, I maybe focus on a few things like her round assist, breast assist things. I don't know. I've been drinking, talking, and Roth shows up, and he's like, "Hey, man, oh, you can't believe what just happened. I gotta talk to you real quick over here." I'm like, "Oh, okay, what's going on, man?" Pull him over. He's like, "All right, I don't know if you noticed that girl's missing an arm." I kind of trying to look back, and like I really can't tell because like she has the sweater kind of draped over her, like she's not trying to call attention to it, obviously. And I kind of sort of see it. I'm like, oh, okay, so it's like, well, I didn't think you noticed it. I don't know how much you've been drinking today or whatever, or how much you were distracted by her tits, but yeah, she's missing. I'm like, I don't really care. And he's like, dude, I don't know, man. It's like the land of Chernobyl. I don't know. He went on some rant about Chernobyl and people with radioactive problems. I said, Roth really never drank. I've literally probably been with him 95% of the time he's ever drank in his life. You know, he's told me he's drank once, I think, since he's left the service, and maybe had drank a couple times before he joined. So I think I've literally been with him most of the time, 95% of the time he's ever drank, and this was one of those days. He was pretty fucked up on vodka. You know what? I have a picture of him and Tony together, so this was definitely the night I went out with Tony. So these pictures should be popping up on the thing here, unless I get them all scanned in, because this is back in the days of disposable cameras. But anyways, yeah, I don't like that kind of broke it up, even though at the time I was like, I really didn't care. Like, okay, she's missing an arm. You know, life goes on. I was having a pretty good conversation. She seemed like an interesting chick otherwise. I don't know. I think I lost her in the crowd at that point, and we moved on. And I don't remember when. I know just running into Roth again later. I ran into TJ, the Russian pimp, again later, and he's like, I don't know. I think that was his real first name. He hated going by it in the service. It's always Roth. I think your friend Brian drunk and wandered off with underage girl. Like, well, shouldn't you try to? I can't do a Russian accent. I'm so sorry. But and I was like, well, dude, shouldn't you stop him from getting in fucking trouble? He's like, you're right. I'll be back. So, fuck it. So the story was like, yeah, Roth was messed up and started making out with a girl who probably wasn't of age. He didn't know any better. Luckily, someone there knew better. But he pulled him off and told him, I don't know if this is what his actual quote, or if it was just embellishment for comedy purposes. But the line he told him is like, you, because they were like basically down to like pulling pants and stuff off. And he kind of pulls him aside and says, like, that is a 14-year-old girl. You will go to Siberian beat mines if you fuck her. So he was like, all right. Like, he had enough sense to know, like, okay, this is a bad idea, and pulled his pants up. And, like, we ended up hanging back together again. And I don't really remember the outcome of that night. I remember the next night pretty well. Like, it was kind of a smorgasbord of drinking and pretty Russian ladies, good times. But what I really remember was the last day when I was on duty, because like just all built up, and I was just so fucking hungover, and it was my duty day, which is whatever, because all I had was tour guides, which means I get out in whites, and I go stand in a place and be a human arrow and just kind of point people to the next door they're supposed to go through, and they don't train you on this. Like after I became a PAO, after that, I'm like, why do none of the I would have been like, at least everyone on the air, everyone should know what they should be talking about and whatever's around them at their arrow point. But they just randomly assigned it, and we were left to make up whatever the fuck we wanted to. So I came up with 20, 30 stories about this weird golf ball antenna thing we had, you know, what it did, and, you know, whether or not it stored soccer balls, or it had a bunch of nuclear missile silos in it. I came up with all sorts of stuff. It was a lot of fun. So that was and I got a lot of pictures of me with the various tourists on the ship, and yeah, you can definitely tell in every picture how fucking hungover I am. But and I think I don't remember if the anchor got screwed up on this one or the last trip. And if it did on the last trip, I might have talked about it. But regardless, just short story quick on one of these, we did a Mediterranean Moor, which is the only place we ever did it for the Blue Ridge when I was on it, and it involves dropping an anchor in port and anchor chain. And one of the trips, I think it was the 98 one. Yeah, we set it because we manned the rails pulling out, and we manned the rails for like an ungodly amount of time, maybe close to 2 hours, because the chain got fucking tangled. And they finally released us, well, because it was like, okay, this is going to take a minute. We're going to have people passing out up here, considering probably what percentage of them are still fucked up on vodka from the night before. So yeah, they finally, and I think people were already falling out at that point. There's like already, secure. It doesn't look good overall for us, but I mean, you got to do what you got to do. Like we just pulled out there like a bunch of chumps. But yeah, that was Russia, and I've covered both my times in Russia. I think very, very interesting stuff. I would love to go back again as a civilian to like a place like Moscow, just to kind of compare it in my head to what I know from Vladivostok from the 90s. Anyway, that's it. That is the Tales from the Fleet. Salty Seaman talking about Russia once again. About to start on another episode of Generation Kill for those y'all looking forward to it. That's all I got for now. Peace, bitches.